I actually want to focus on something a little bit different because I think this is one of the areas where what the Trump administration can do and has done is going to be one of the major drivers of bringing down the cost of housing. Now, local zoning, regulations, the cost of energy, these things are about the supply of housing. How do we get more houses out there to be built? But I think it's important to talk about the demand side of the housing market. And so much of what we're doing in the Trump administration when it comes to the immigration issue is framed about law enforcement, about reducing fentanyl coming into our communities. And that is true. That is a big part of why we're doing what we're doing at the border. But when we talk about housing and why costs are so high, we don't talk enough about demand. And one of the drivers of increased housing demand, we know, is that we've got a lot of people over the last 4 years who have come into the country illegally. And that's something we have to work on if we want to meaningfully reduce the cost of housing too. Now just think about this. If you allow 20 million people to compete with American citizens for the cost of homes, you are going to have a large and frankly completely preventable spike in the demand for housing. And that is what we, of course, have seen, because while we made it a little bit hard to build homes in this country over the last 4 years, we've also, unfortunately, made it way too easy for people to compete against American citizens for the precious homes that are in our country to begin with. Now, I'll say this, it's actually not just an American problem either. If you go to Canada, where because of their laws and regulations, they've seen a massive increase in the number of people who have come into their country. You go to the United Kingdom, you go across the world, and you see a very consistent relationship between a massive increase in immigration and a massive increase in housing prices. And we have to be honest about that. Well, I see one of our nice representatives out here wants to actually, I guess, continue to flood the country with illegal immigrants, making your communities and citizens unaffordable. But, ma'am, with all respect, one of the reasons why we're doing what we're doing is because we want to make it more affordable for Americans to live. That is one of the reasons why we're doing what we're doing. Now, last week, I visited the southern border, and we decided to check in on what's going on there at the southern border. And of course, like I said earlier, you often hear about immigration enforcement as about crime and about drug trafficking, and that is a big part of it. I was at Eagle Pass, and I was talking to local border control down there, and they told me that in just a matter of weeks, their small part of the border had gone from 1,500 daily encounters to less than 30. And again, that's in a matter of weeks. That's just a simple matter of common sense border enforcement. That matters. Thank you. And let's talk about why it matters. I mentioned housing. But one of the things I heard down there, I was talking to the mayor in that community, and he said it's incredibly stressful on local resources. It's stressful on their local hospitals. It's stressful on their local schools to have this massive increase. And so while, look, I recognize there's a diversity of opinions here. Clearly there is. I also think it's important to be honest about those disagreements, to acknowledge those disagreements, but to say that the reason why we care about border security is because we want your communities to be safer, we want them to be more affordable, we want there to be less drugs in our country, and we want your citizens to be able to live the American dream. It is the birthright of every single one of our citizens, and we're going to fight for it every single day. So, with all due respect for some of the disagreements in opinion, I'd say we welcome disagreements. We want to talk about those disagreements, but we also have to respect the law in the United States of America. And I can tell And I can tell you that, yes, of course, you're going to disagree with some of our policies. That's okay. Come and tell us when you disagree with our policies, and we'll have a conversation about it. Maybe don't shout it in front of 2,000 people. I can't even hear what you're saying, sir. But importantly, on this question of immigration, we have to recognize that, yes, you can disagree with some of the laws that are in place. You can disagree with the enforcement of those laws. You can even vote for people who want to change those laws. But while we have immigration laws on the books, we will enforce them, and we expect our local municipalities to help us. So it will be the policy of the Trump administration to enforce the nation's laws, and it will be the policy of the Trump administration to say that it is not up to local cities to choose which federal laws that they're going to enforce. It's important. We can't do immigration enforcement with sanctuary cities. We've got to have everybody respecting the law, and that is going to be one of the major policy focuses, of course, of the Trump administration, and it already has been. And I want to just say one final point about this issue of housing and of the strains that immigration and illegal immigration in particular put on our housing stock. We know from economists that blue-collar folks are often those who face the biggest cuts in wages and in services when you have communities overwhelmed by illegal immigration. I come from a blue-collar family, and I think one of the main drivers is that we need to be able to give our citizens, black, white, or whatever skin color, whatever belief system that they have, if you are an American citizen, you deserve to have a government at the local, city, and federal level that fights for the American dream for you. And we've seen yes, over the Biden administration, but let's be honest, over 40 years of American policy, we've seen a lot of our blue-collar Americans, urban and rural, struggling to afford a home, struggling to raise their kids in safe communities, struggling to look to the future with hope and optimism. And so, with all respect for policy disagreements, I think that one thing that unites us in this room is that we want to give our blue-collar people in the United States of America a shot at the American dream again. We may disagree about how exactly to do it, but let's do it together. Let's fight for our people together, and let's reinvigorate the American dream for the American citizen once again.